Welcome again, everyone, and let's get started. A few words about myself. I am naturopathic Dr. Kate Rayom. I am a graduate and former faculty member of the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine. I speak on many topics related to health and wellness, but this one is near and dear to my heart because I literally wrote the book about it, that's this here, vitamin K2 and the calcium paradox. I'll mention that a little bit later. I'm also a busy working mom and speaking about lots of different topics as it relates to natural health. And I'm going to, after my intro here, turn my camera off because I find at this time of night, the lights are hard on my eyes, but you'll still be able to see me. And as I said, feel free to type questions into the Q&A area or the chat. I'll look at the Q&A area first at the end. I won't generally be able to keep an eye on it as we go along. In terms of troubleshooting, I'm not sure if anyone is on the line from Healthy Planet for technical aspects of things. So hopefully this all goes smoothly. Okay, let me just see here. Okay, so welcome to Vitamin K2 for stronger bones, healthier heart, and more. We're going to cover more than just vitamin K2 tonight, because we want to know about more aspects of strong bones and healthy hearts. Our learning objectives for this session will be talking about the calcium paradox. What is that? What does it mean? When is calcium helpful? When is it harmful? What do we need to know about it? Secondly, the importance of collagen. It plays a surprising role in heart and bone health, and what can we do to keep it healthy? And then thirdly, we will get around to talking about vitamin K2, as well as other key nutrients in the promotion of bone and heart health. Now, both bone health and heart health are huge topics, and we could spend a long time speaking about either one. I'm not necessarily saying that in the next 45 minutes, we're going to do an exhaustive deep dive into both of these conditions. That wouldn't be possible. However, I will highlight a few key points, a few key nutrients as well, particularly because they tend to be at the heart of some, missing information or misunderstanding around these health concerns. All right, so what is the calcium paradox? The fact is, we need calcium in our bodies, but we need it to be in the right places. And calcium has a tendency to get into the wrong places. And paradoxically, we can have both a lack of calcium where it's needed, which is what we see with osteoporosis, as well as an excess of calcium where it's not needed. Atherosclerosis is one example of this. You could also have calcium buildup in places like heel spurs, kidney stones. So we need calcium actually all the time in the body, and we have it there in quite high amounts, and it's fairly well controlled, the amount of calcium in our body, because we need it for our muscles to contract, our nerves to fire, our heart to beat. And so if you're lacking calcium, it's typically not because you don't have enough of it in your blood, for example, but there's something else going on. So this is the paradox of calcium. We need it, but we need it in the right places. When it gets into the wrong places, it can be definitely problematic, but it's not calcium's fault. And this is where things get really interesting, because you think, oh, well, if calcium's building up somewhere, maybe we should be taking in less calcium. But by and large, calcium, of course, it's a mineral. It's kind of, I wouldn't say it's inert, but it doesn't move around on its own. There are other nutrients and other systems in the body that will direct calcium, tell it where to go and where not to go. And so, if you have, osteoporosis, a lack of calcium where it's needed, taking more calcium won't necessarily get that calcium into your bones. Similarly, if you have atherosclerosis or hardening of the arteries and excess of calcium, just trying to cut back on calcium won't get that out of your arteries. So let's talk about ways we can help this. So the two main health conditions, of course, we're focusing on here tonight is bone health and heart health. So osteoporosis and atherosclerosis. When it comes to heart health, so there's lots, that's a big umbrella term that covers lots of conditions, but we're going to be looking at atherosclerosis or hardening of the arteries, which is the major killer of both men and women in North America. Okay, but let's start with osteoporosis. So this is the part of the equation where we should have calcium, but we don't. And this, of course, happens when bones become porous. So actually, throughout our lives, bones, they seem very solid and unchanging, but they're changing just as fast as all the other tissues. They're just as dynamic as any other tissue in the body, constantly breaking down and then being built up, something called remodeling. So there are cells that break bones down, and that's how we heal fractures and we maintain fresh, healthy bone, because then we have cells that build in the new fresh bone. So you can see on the picture here, the left would be a normal bone matrix. But what happens is if the bone breakdown process starts to exceed or is faster than the bone building process, then there's little holes left behind in the bone. That's called osteoporosis. The bones become more porous, less dense, and then that means they're typically more brittle and prone to breaking. But osteoporosis requires more than just calcium. So when the bones are porous like this, it's not just calcium that's missing from the bones. Of course, there's calcium in the bones. There's lots of other minerals as well. And in fact, bones are 50% protein by dry weight. That's incredible to think about because, again, bones seem so hard. But they're definitely not made of pure minerals. Bones have a scaffolding of protein that's primarily collagen, and the collagen provides binding sites for the calcium and other minerals that get in there. So they really are dynamic living tissue. And when we're lacking bone density, we're often also lacking not just the minerals, but the protein matrix that holds those minerals in. So I'll talk about that more shortly in a minute. But first, let's talk about atherosclerosis. So again, this is the side of the equation where calcium can build up that it's not supposed to, something called hardening of the arteries. So atherosclerosis is a thickening and often a hardening of the arteries caused by a buildup of plaque in the arteries. So what happens here? Well, the arteries can become damaged. I'll explain a little bit how that can happen, or the lining of the arteries, which is called the endothelium, can fail to be able to repair that damage. Some fatty substances, things like cholesterol, for example, can travel to the area in an attempt to heal that damage. They're trying to help and fix the problem. But if they don't have the nutrients they need to complete the repair process properly, then you can get a buildup of all kinds of things, fatty substances, cellular waste products, fibrin, which is like clot-like, it's trying to stabilize, again, this area. And then this can become calcified. So that is problematic when that happens, because that's something called hardening of the arteries. And as the arteries build up, the artery will become thickened and stiff. Now, calcification can happen even in healthy arteries. We see stiffening. So the little elastic tissues that allow the arteries to expand and contract with each heartbeat, they can become a little bit calcified. And then the arteries become stiff. So I'll talk about that later and how we can help with that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the loss of collagen from bone. I know I'm going back and forth here, but I want to sort of draw parallels between these areas where we typically see calcium loss and calcium buildup. There's also problems with collagen happening. So when we look at collagen breakdown in bone, you can see on the left, that is a schematic that represents a healthy bone that has more collagen in it, which is more surface area for calcium to bind to. So you can throw all kinds of calcium at your bones, but if the protein matrix that should be there is not there, or it's shrinking, or it looks like the schematic on the right, then the calcium simply can't bind to those areas. So when collagen levels decline, the skeletal matrix shrinks, and the average woman loses 8 to 9% of bone mineral density beginning after menopause. So we're going to talk about the importance of K2 that helps direct calcium to bones, but ultimately if the protein isn't there to hold it in, that can be problematic. Okay, same thing happens. I mentioned before that often what triggers a plaque formation in the arteries is an injury or some damage to the arteries. And why is the artery becoming damaged? Well, collagen is also found in our arteries. So a normal artery that has sufficient healthy amounts of collagen will have nice smooth walls. And this is one factor in healthy arteries. There's lots of other things going on. Arteries definitely are not pipes that become clogged with fat, which is an analogy that we've used, which doesn't show our arteries nearly the respect that they deserve. Arteries are also lined with a dynamic lining called an endothelium, and that it does all kinds of wonderful things in helping to keep the artery healthy. However, as we age, we begin to lose collagen, and the arteries are also, the structure and wall of them are consisting 40% of collagen as well as elastin. Again, this is elastic tissue that helps them expand and contract. And when that collagen and elastin is missing, then the walls of the arteries can become thin in certain spots, can become more prone to being damaged in certain areas. And the body will then go in to try to patch that up. And then things can go wrong, lesions forming, plaques, again, atherosclerosis, and hardening of those areas. So that's a problematic. So we see the underlying factor in terms of collagen throughout the body and maintaining it as part of our health. So what can we do? Again, there are whole webinars that we can talk just about collagen health. We'll just say a few things. And this is an important one that comes up. So in the 2023 Annual Congress of the American Heart Association, the authorities have mentioned that the low rates of heart disease and coronary atherosclerosis, so in other words, the major killer in North America and much of the Western world, is found to be in people who have elastic arteries. So their arteries are more stretchy and elastic. Again, that speaks to collagen and elastin, keeping the arteries nice and flexible. I'll say a little bit about how to do that later on. And here is an interesting sign, if you've heard of this, that a diagonal crease across the earlobe, like the one pictured here, is a potential indicator of coronary artery disease. Now, I know everybody's fiddling with their earlobes right now to see if they've got that or checking the mirror, maybe. And the fact is, this is it's indicative, and it's an area where you can actually see the small blood vessels in the earlobe kinking, especially, or not having the smooth blood flow that they should because they're not as elastic as they should. So that all pertains to, again, collagen and elastin are both made by the same cell, and we'll talk a little bit about how to keep them healthy, keep that tissue healthy, and even reverse some of the hardening that can happen. Okay, so one of the nutrients that is important to know about when it comes to collagen, and I'll just say a couple of words about this before I move on to vitamin K2, is vitamin C. Vitamin C is required for the enzymes that make collagen. Making collagen is a two-step process. Vitamin C is required for both of the steps. When you have vitamin C, you get nice, strong, healthy connective tissue on the left-hand side with a good structure to it. When there's no vitamin C, you get weak, unhealthy collagen, weak, unhealthy connective tissue. A deficiency in vitamin C inhibits collagen production. That's why when people get scurvy, for example, I know that's an old-fashioned disease, but people's teeth fall out because they don't have enough vitamin C to make the collagen to maintain healthy gums, and then the gums can't hold the teeth in. That's where that comes from. But even if you don't have scurvy, vitamin C is not a nutrient. Humans are one of the few animals that can't make their own vitamin C. We don't do that. Most other mammals can. So we need to take it in through our diet. And when we take it in, the body will prioritize it for a few uses. Number one will be the stress response. When you're under stress, your body will take any vitamin C you're getting and use it to make stress hormones. And if you don't have enough left over for your collagen production, because that's not urgent in the moment, well, you're going to look stressed after you were stressed. More lines, more dark circles under the eyes. That's why that happens. That's why people look stressed after being stressed. The vitamin C will also be used for immune support. Again, when you're under stress, the body, that's the biggest priority, the fight or flight, and you may get sick after your stress because you did not have enough vitamin C for that. So the key is to be getting in ample amounts of vitamin C for stress, immunity, as well as declining collagen production. That's an important nutrient to keep in mind. We know that vitamin C is water soluble. In other words, you pee it out. So that means you do need to be taking it in on a regular basis. We don't make it ourselves. So it's what's called an essential nutrient. We have to take it in. Higher vitamin C intake has been associated with a lower likelihood of wrinkled appearance, less dry skin, also with brighter skin. You've seen the vitamin C serums you can put topically on the skin. They do help to brighten the skin. Taking it on the inside helps too. But the wrinkles and dry appearance is due to the collagen. You need more collagen as you age. Definitely if you're a smoker, because you need to fight all those free radicals. UV light will cause degradation of collagen, which requires more vitamin C to fix, depending on your genetics, diet, and lifestyle factors. For example, if you're a heavy exerciser, you will need more vitamin C to help with the tissue repair and collagen maintenance. And this definitely affects bone health, artery health. So vitamin C is a nutrient. Now, at this point, a lot of people may be thinking, well, how much? And that's a difficult question to answer when it comes to vitamin C, because as I mentioned, depends on age, your lifestyle. Certainly the recommended daily intake, which I think is what now, 90 milligrams, something like that, is probably just barely enough to prevent scurvy. So you're looking at, I would say for most people, at least 500 milligrams per day. If you're under stress, you would definitely consider doubling that. It's not that you need super high doses, 10 grams, 20 grams. And there's possible, there's such a thing as too much, but, you're definitely safe and probably it's a good idea to be taking at least 500 milligrams on a daily basis. Just a quick, I know there's a lot of information on this slide here, but it's just a quick look at the fact that vitamin C deficiency, so inadequate intake of vitamin C, has been associated with the incidence of cardiac events, as well as with heart failure and quality of life. So that's really interesting to see these kinds of differences with just something as simple as vitamin C. All this typically comes down to, yes, free radical protection, for sure. Vitamin C is a wonderful antioxidant, but maintaining that collagen definitely makes a difference. So lots of different vitamin C products on the market, lots of great ones, easy ways to get it in. I should have shown just a big, screen of all the different ones you can get. Adults, children, powders, chewables, capsules, soft gels. If you don't think that you're getting enough in through your diet, or if you're going through a time when you're under stress, your body's using it more for stress hormones, then here's an example of a high absorption. This is a liposomal vitamin C, 1,000 milligrams per 2 capsule dose. So this can be 1 to 2 capsules per day to help with immune function and collagen formation. Okay, so let us move on to talk about the calcium paradox again. So I needed to explain the part about collagen because I often don't necessarily get into that on this topic, but I really want you to know how important that is. So what can often happen is, I've mentioned a few times that we have can end up with calcification in the arteries. And this has been found to be, in fact, a really important risk factor and predictor of your risk of having a heart attack. So cholesterol levels, not necessarily an excellent predictor of whether or not a heart attack will happen, but how much calcium is in the coronary arteries. These are the arteries that feed the heart. These are the ones that tend to get blocked when there's a heart attack. That can really be a good predictor. Now, this is not a test that people can typically get. You might be able to get it at something like MedCam, one of these private medical places, or go down to the States, place like Buffalo MRI, for example. It's a few $100s. And it will tell you the amount of calcification in the coronary arteries. And this really does speak to and gets at, much more so than cholesterol levels, not to, no pun intended, but the heart of the matter when it comes to atherosclerosis. Okay, so this is where we get to vitamin K2. So keep that thought in mind when we'll talk about a nutrient that has long been overlooked in this picture for both heart health and bone health, and that is vitamin K2. And vitamin K2 is a nutrient that will help keep calcium in its place. So it helps to guide calcium towards the bones and promote bone mineralization. And at the same time, it helps to keep calcium out of areas like our arteries, and it can even reverse some calcification and some hardening of the arteries. And so this really being overlooked is definitely a missing link and very important part of the picture of keeping calcium in its place. It's not the only thing. We need to consider magnesium. Is a factor. And of course, as we were saying, if there's no protein matrix there, even K2 and calcium will only help so much for keeping calcium in your bones. But this is how vitamin K2 works and what it does. It guides calcium towards the areas where you want it, bones and teeth, keeps it out of areas you don't want it, like your arteries, heel spurs, and kidney stones. So vitamin K2 was overlooked for a long time due to essentially a case of mistaken identity. Back in the 1920s, the K vitamins were discovered, and they found that this initial vitamin, vitamin K1, was used for blood clotting, and it was very common in green leafy vegetables. And in fact, vitamin K1 is recycled in the body, so deficiency of it is extremely rare, usually secondary to some kind of a liver disease or some problem like that. And so for the most part, even if you're eating the parsley on the side of your plate once in a while, you're probably getting enough vitamin K1. And at the time researchers discovered this, realized that actually the researchers won a Nobel Prize for this discovery because it was such an important discovery. But they saw this other form of the nutrient that was slightly different. So they said, well, it's K2, but they figured K1, K2, probably more or less the same thing. And for that reason, vitamin K2 was overlooked for like the next 7 decades, next 70 years. And there's still a lot of confusion and misinformation about vitamin K2. Vitamin K2 is not found in green leafy vegetables. It does not participate in blood clotting under normal circumstances. And it is not recycled the way vitamin K1 is. So you absolutely can become deficient in vitamin K2. So as I mentioned, not stored in the body, no recycling, so it must be provided daily. You do make a very tiny amount of vitamin K2 by the bacteria in your intestines. And for that reason, I think researchers looked at that way back when and thought, oh, you know what, we're making it ourselves, that must be enough. But it turns out it's not enough. And humans can develop a deficiency of vitamin K2 in as little as a week on a vitamin K2 deficient diet. And what does that mean? Well, a deficiency means you don't have all of the vitamin K2 that you need to keep calcium where you want it to all the time. So this deficiency won't be obvious the way some other deficiencies are. If you're deficient in vitamin K1, again, very rare, but you'll notice because you will start to bleed or bruise, or there'll be something obvious. If you're deficient in vitamin K2, maybe you'll lose a little bit of bone density, or maybe you'll have, some stiffening of the arteries, some plaque buildup, or something like that. You don't notice that for years, maybe even decades. So it's one of these silent killer issues when we don't have enough vitamin K2 to keep calcium in check at all times. And when we're taking vitamin D, for example, vitamin D helps us absorb calcium, which is great from the intestines. But once it's absorbed, vitamin D has no control over where the calcium goes. It could go anywhere. And in fact, it's not that common, but when we do see side effects of too much vitamin D, the side effect you see is calcification. The body keeps absorbing and absorbing calcium. There's no breaks, there's no stopping for that. And then the calcium's got to go somewhere. And that's what we see with too much vitamin D on its own. So really anybody taking vitamin D will actually get the more benefits from, and more safely, the benefits from vitamin D when you take it with vitamin K2. So if we're not getting vitamin K2 from grass-fed foods, we are getting it from, we're not getting it from grass, but we are getting it from the animals that eat the grass. So we as human beings can't really take those green leafy vegetables that contain vitamin K1 and turn them into K2, but animals can do that. So grass-fed foods are some of the best sources of vitamin K2, egg yolks, butter, cheese, of animals that have been out on grass. However, how common is that, right? Like in the wintertime in Canada, you've got 6 months out of the year at least. That's not even a possibility. You don't want to fly all your, eggs and things in from New Zealand or wherever. Fortunately, certain types of fermented foods, not all, but some. So certain types of cheeses, Brie, Gouda, Jarlsberg, these are cheeses that are high in vitamin K2. The milk does not have to be grass-fed, doesn't matter. But the bacteria that do the fermentation will make vitamin K2. There's also a Japanese fermented soybean food called natto. I'll talk about that next. And supplements are also a source of vitamin K2. So brie and a glass of red wine, absolutely a heart-healthy snack. As well as Gouda, Jarlsberg. You could have anything with your red wine if you wanted for a heart-healthy snack. Natto, this is, as I mentioned, a traditional Japanese fermented soybean food, fermented by a specific type of bacteria. So your miso and tempeh do not contain vitamin K2. They are fermented with other bacteria that don't have that benefit. And this is eaten, it's a regional thing. It's eaten in some, but not all areas of Japan. And I mention that because they've done studies where they show that people in the areas who eat this tend to have better bone health and heart health. It happens to be the highest known food in vitamin K2. Now, there is a Korean version of this, but I can't pronounce the name properly. I butcher it, so my apologies. But there is also a Korean version of a fermented soy food like this that's also high in vitamin K2. They've done interesting studies where they looked at a statistically significant inverse correlation between incidence of hip fracture in women and natto consumption. In other words, the areas where people ate the natto, the more natto people ate in those areas, the lower the hip fracture and vice versa. So that's really interesting. So natto is one of the highest known foods in vitamin K2, and that's where typically supplements are made from the natto bean. So vitamin K2 arguably is, one of the most important, if not the most overlooked important nutrient to prevent heart disease. K2 will not lower cholesterol, but it can help prevent it, even reverse atherosclerosis. So there's one study done in postmenopausal women that showed that vitamin K2 can help restore arterial flexibility or decrease arterial stiffness. So even when there is not plaque building up in the arteries, as I mentioned, the elastic tissues in the arteries can become slightly calcified, which can make them stiffer. Stiffer arteries are less healthy arteries, and vitamin K2 has been shown to reverse arterial stiffness that tends to come along with menopause. When it comes to bone health, vitamin K2 does all kinds of interesting things. It certainly works synergistically with vitamin D. So as I mentioned, vitamin D helps us absorb calcium, but then vitamin K2 will take it and direct it towards the bones. Vitamin D stimulates the bone building cells, and vitamin K2 slows down the bone breakdown cells. So remember, there's always this process of remodeling in bones. Bones are being broken down and then remodeled or refilled, build back up. So vitamin D does stimulate the bone building. Vitamin K2 will slow the bone breakdown process. In menopause, declining estrogen levels in women impact bone health in 3 different ways. It gets a little bit technical. I won't get into that necessarily, but supplementing with vitamin K2 has been shown to compensate for the changes in bone density due to menopause. And studies have shown that vitamin K2 and D together work better for either nutrient alone. Not only do they seem to help improve bone density, but they seem to help improve bone microarchitecture and bone strength. So in other words, you don't just want to have more dense bones, but you want the structure of those bones and the way the bones are being rebuilt to have a specific a shape to it. And that keeps the bones healthy and strong. The collagen as a matrix that we talked about earlier, that helps, yes, it provides a binding site for the calcium in the minerals. It also provides the bones with a little bit of flex and bounce. So when you fall, your bones just don't snap, bounce a little bit. to resist fractures. So that's important. And then the K2 and D help direct the minerals to the bones. So here's a look at, we talked about foods for vitamin K2. Again, if you can find grass-fed foods, that's wonderful. I think for the most part, especially in the wintertime, fermented foods, whether they are dairy-based or plant-based like natto, are great. But if you don't feel, I love brie cheese, but I can only eat so much of it. Or if you don't do well with dairy, then a supplement is a great idea if you're particularly concerned about bone or heart health. So vitamin K2, as I mentioned, is a nutrient that will keep calcium in its place, work synergistically with vitamin D. If you already have and are taking vitamin D, you can find vitamin K2 capsules on their own, so that you can see, for example, the one on the left, it's 100 micrograms of vitamin K2. Or for convenience, you can buy vitamin K and D together. It's one capsule instead of taking two. This is something that just makes it convenient. The one on the right has 100, the label should say vitamin K2. I don't know why it doesn't, but that's what's in there, vitamin K2 and vitamin D3. 120 micrograms, 100, 120, it's very, very similar amounts. Micrograms are a very small amount. You don't need very much. A little goes a long way. Typical recommended adult dosage is 1 capsule for general health maintenance, is 1 capsule per day. For individuals who have bone health concerns or low bone density, the amount of vitamin K2 being used in the bone health studies is 180 micrograms. So for easy math, that would be like 2 capsules per day. And the amount of vitamin K2 being used in arterial or heart health studies would be roughly 3 capsules per day. So that's the 1, 2, 3 rule. 1 is general health maintenance, 2 for bone health, 3 for arterial health. That's typically, the kinds of doses that the studies are using. The numbers I'm talking about here, these tiny microgram numbers, this is what's called MK7. This is a fermented form of vitamin K2 coming from the natto bean. Other roles, by the way, like the health roles of vitamin K2 includes dental health. Vitamin K2 doesn't have very many deficiency symptoms, obvious things you can see, but tooth sensitivity, certainly many people who start taking vitamin K2 remark that their tooth sensitivity goes away. It's something I used to have for a long period of time and haven't had it in many years now. There's definitely a lot of research around cancer, particularly prostate cancer, as well as some about liver and breast, potential benefits for varicose veins, definitely very important for children. As their skeletons are growing, they need vitamin K2. Normally, I think with children, we recommend smaller amounts because they have smaller bodies. But in this case, yes, they're smaller, but their skeletons are doing something that ours aren't, which is growing. It's a very dynamic process. So they can take the same single capsule dose, very safe for kids. And I've given my own kids usually the K and Ds from the time they were toddlers. And potentially some anti-wrinkle activity. Again, there's an overlap there between vitamin K2 and collagen, as well as preventing calcification of the elastic tissues that help keep our skin nice and stretchy. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about cholesterol, because we've been talking so much about heart health. At this point, you may be thinking, well, how can we talk so much about heart health and barely say anything so far about cholesterol? And the fact is, such intense focus on cholesterol may have led us astray in the fight against heart disease, because although it has a place and a role, it's certainly not the single most important factor when it comes to heart health. So the truth about cholesterol is that 50% of heart attack patients have normal cholesterol levels at the time of their heart attack and never had a history of high cholesterol. Now, that's a bit surprising because we tend to think that, when it comes to a heart attack, that it's all about cholesterol. But the fact is that half of people who have heart attacks didn't have high cholesterol. So that means if you went and got your cholesterol tested and it was normal or healthy, you're not necessarily in the clear or have zero risk for a heart attack. So it's not to scare anyone on that, but not to be complacent and think that's the single most important thing. Of course, lifestyle in terms of activity, risk factors that are very important for heart health is, or heart attack, for example, would be being sedentary, smoking, high stress, diabetes, high blood sugar. A family history definitely plays into that. Weight, carrying lots of extra weight. All of those things are important in addition to nutrition. High inflammation in the body is also a factor. I'll talk about that shortly. So the take-home point here is just because you have normal cholesterol level doesn't mean that you are not at risk for heart health issues. And the flip side is just because you have high cholesterol, especially if it's just moderately high, definitely does not mean that you're at higher risk for a heart attack. And that's even, I think, probably more important. Here is a study from the BMJ, British Medical Journal, very prestigious, showing that, just go over the title here, a lack of an association or an inverse association between low density lipoprotein, LDL, the so-called bad cholesterol, and mortality in the elderly, a systemic review. So what does this mean? There doesn't seem to be any association between whether your cholesterol levels are higher, or your LDL, your so-called bad cholesterol, whether your LDL is high or low, and how soon or late you will develop, you will either die or develop a cardiovascular disease event. There's other studies that's showing that a slightly elevated amount of cholesterol for elderly patients, so I would say people 60 and over, has possibly a protective effect, possibly a lower association with both heart attack and dementia. So especially I would say if you're 60 plus and you have slightly elevated cholesterol, otherwise no risk factors, I wouldn't be too concerned about, trying to lower your cholesterol per se, and there's other important things you can look at. So really, and there's another here in the expert review of clinical pharmacology, LDL, that's the low density lipoprotein, so-called bad cholesterol, does not cause cardiovascular disease. That's based on a comprehensive review of the literature. So this is important to keep in mind. Cholesterol really is not the problem. And it's not a great predictor, your cholesterol levels, as we've seen, right? You can have normal cholesterol and heart attack, or higher cholesterol and no heart attack. Not a great predictor of your risk of heart attack. The process that leads to atherosclerosis, so there's, can be potentially thinning arteries because of the loss of collagen. But then there's inflammation that happens that damages the lining of the arteries. Remember I mentioned that one cell layer thick lining called the endothelium that's dynamic, doing all kinds of things, interesting things. But when there's inflammation, that lining can't keep the arteries healthy. So cholesterol, there can be a role that it plays here, because cholesterol will tend to go to an area as part of the healing process. But if the cholesterol that arrives in the damaged area as part of the healing process is oxidized, basically it's like rusted, then it can't do its job. And here is where we see the beginnings of problems. So it's not cholesterol that's bad, but it's oxidized cholesterol that can't fulfill the healing, anti-inflammatory role that it's supposed to. And this is where things go awry. And so with this, understanding this gives us some new goals. So we want to dig deeper. When we're told our cholesterol is high, we want to find out, well, which is high? There's, so-called good or bad. Maybe both your HDL, which is the good cholesterol, is also high, and that's fine. But the LDL, even if it is high, is it oxidized? There's a test we can do for that. I'll show that shortly. We want to support the endothelium, give it what it needs to do its job, reduce oxidation, which is, again, this free radical damage or rusting, the oxidation of the cholesterol, reduce inflammation. And I'll just say a few words as well about a healthy microbiome. So lipoprotein A, or LPA, this is a test that you can do that checks to see how much of your cholesterol is oxidized. So it's rusted, damaged, not doing good things when it shows up in an area to help heal your arteries. That is about 6 times the atherogenic risk. In other words, generating atherosclerosis than regular LDL. So the regular so-called bad cholesterol is not bad until it becomes oxidized. And that is really important to keep in mind. So this test, what's called lipoprotein A or LPA, you can have that done as part of your regular checkup or your regular cholesterol panel. I won't, I'll skip through. I don't have to talk about all of this research around lipoprotein A or LPA, but getting that tested is important. And be aware that statin medications tend to increase LPA levels. They tend to increase them by 10 to 20%. So because statins tend to cause oxidation of the cholesterol. So you're lowering your cholesterol, but the cholesterol that's left can become oxidized. A few more words about statins. I'm not trying to slam any medication, and I'm certainly not trying to say that you should stop any medicine that has been prescribed to you. You need to speak to your healthcare practitioner who prescribed the medicine. But I know lots of people join a webinar with this topic because they are concerned about statins. A lot of people typically will come and say, this is somebody in their 60s, 70s. I have a slightly high cholesterol. My doctor wants me to go on statins, but my gut's telling me I'm not really sure about this. So as we've been shown, if it's a little bit high cholesterol, probably no matter what, it's not concerning. Check to see if it's lipoprotein A, if the cholesterol is oxidized. Be aware if you are taking a statin medication. So there are instances, if you've already had a heart attack, so what's called secondary prevention. For primary prevention, for people who have never had a heart attack and otherwise don't have a lot of risk factors for heart disease, in other words, you're not overweight, not a smoker, et cetera, statins have not been shown to significantly reduce the risk of having a first heart attack, so not preventing a heart attack. If you've already had a heart attack, that's a different equation. Statins they may have a benefit in for lowering the risk of having a second one. That may be the case. But if you are on statins, be aware that they can interfere with coenzyme Q10 production, which is challenging for a few reasons. That can affect the functioning of the heart muscle. And some trials have shown that the extent of the CoQ10 production, that's our own natural CoQ10, can be 40% or more. So definitely if you're on a statin medication, you should be taking CoQ10. And be aware that statins can increase the risk of or the levels of lipoprotein A or that oxidized cholesterol. So speak to your healthcare provider to determine your needs. Often the greatest benefit with the least risk and side effect is on the lowest dose of statin. And that increasing the dose of statin will not necessarily increase the benefit, but more just increase the side effects. So do speak to your doctor about dosing as well if you're on that. So coenzyme Q10, I think everybody has probably heard of this, but maybe you weren't aware of the fact that as an antioxidant, it has been shown to be associated with significant improvements in endothelial function. So again, healing the lining of the arteries. And it's been shown to reduce lipoprotein A levels. It helps to protect our cholesterol from being oxidized and reverse some of the oxidation. So this is really important, good news. Anybody who has heart health concerns, CoQ10 is certainly an important nutrient we know for heart muscle function. It helps the mitochondria produce energy better, which is important for heart, brain, liver, everything. But specifically when it comes to atherosclerosis, CoQ10 will help to reduce lipoprotein A levels. Couple different questions when it comes to CoQ10. Typically, you'll see it in 2 different forms. So CoQ10 exists naturally in 2 different forms. In the body, it will convert back and forth between 2 different forms. One is an electron receiver, one's an electron donor, and it sort of naturally oscillates between these 2 forms. So ubiquinone would be a standard form of CoQ10. Ubiquinol, the one that's showing here, this is a special form of CoQ10 that acts somewhat more efficiently to be an electron donor, which helps quench free radicals. And so ubiquinol active CoQ10, it's considered to be the active form of CoQ10, which is produced by our cells. This form is better absorbed, and particularly as we age. Now, this form, I would say, is about 25% more effective than a standard CoQ10. It's also a little bit more expensive. So if you're on a budget, you will still get the benefits of CoQ10 from a standard ubiquinone form, and that's a little bit less expensive. But the ubiquinol is more effective free radical quencher. Certainly, if you have significant heart health concerns or on a statin, I would tend to go for the ubiquinol form. But you can, my point here is if you're on a budget, then ubiquinone helps as well. Okay, so moving along from the cholesterol issue, because I just really wanted to address that point about the oxidized cholesterol lipoprotein A, to say a few more things in terms of key nutrients that are really important and often overlooked. This one does double duty for bone and heart health, and that's magnesium. Magnesium, so wonderful, does so many things for us. You've probably heard it activates over 350 enzymes in the body. It's the anti-stress mineral, helps keep us relaxed, helps deal with muscle cramps, muscle twitches, and we use up more of it when we're under stress. It's nice to promote a healthier sleep quality, healthy blood pressure. It works in the endothelium to help maintain healthy blood pressure. Magnesium works with vitamin K2 to keep calcium in its place. So while vitamin K2 will tell calcium where to go, magnesium also helps to keep calcium in check. You've probably heard, of course, magnesium and calcium are buddies. In nature, you will often find these pairs. It's like the yin and the yang that tend to balance one another out, magnesium and calcium, sodium and potassium. We could go on and on about these. So magnesium helps keep calcium in check. Magnesium, we can become depleted. Its levels aren't regulated quite to the same extent that calcium is. Magnesium will assist in, and it's required for the activation of vitamin D3. So if you're taking vitamin D3, but you're deficient in magnesium, you might not be activating all of it. And in a 2020 update on magnesium's role in bone health, all studies showed that there was a benefit in both in terms of bone mineral density and fracture risk. We know that low magnesium affects both bone and heart health. Lots of different options when it comes to magnesium. Food sources include green leafy vegetables, nuts and seeds, whole grains, for example, but also one that's challenging. So the recommended daily intakes, in other words, the bare minimum amount of magnesium you need to get in every day to avoid a deficiency, is around 400 milligrams per day for teens and adults. That is not easy to get from food alone. And so a supplement can really make a difference, especially if you have any specific health concerns, bone health, heart health, etc. Then a supplement can really go a long way, especially a nice thing to take at night. I find it helps provide a nice, relaxing, peaceful sleep quality. Won't make you drowsy, but it's just nice at nighttime. Can be taken at any time during the day. This form here, magnesium bisglycinate, you have probably heard a lot about it. It's gentle on the stomach, and it doesn't risk causing stomach up, much less likely to cause stomach upset the way, say, for example, magnesium citrate might. I like magnesium citrate. I call it cheap and cheerful, inexpensive and effective. Some people find it hard on the stomach, so that's where the magnesium bisglycinate comes in. Okay, and then one of the last things I want to say are when we're talking about preventing inflammation and oxidation and maintaining a healthy lipid level, omega-3 essential fatty acids, they're critical for so many aspects of health, skin, hair, joints, mood, brain health, cardiovascular health. They're found in both seeds, nuts and seeds, as well as fish and fish oil. The larger fish like salmon, for example, can't be eaten more than a couple of times per week. This is even according to Conservative Health Canada. due to the environmental toxins, even if in wild caught fish. But we want to get those healthy fats in on a daily basis. So a good quality omega-3 supplement. This is for overall health, but also particularly targeted at heart health. Here's an example: Regeneralife Omega-3, 2,200 milligrams of omega-3 per 2 soft gel. So it's a little over 1,000, it's 1,100 milligrams per 1 single soft gel. No fishy aftertaste because there's an enteric coating baked right into the soft gel. That cuts down on that for most people. If you still find, for whatever reason, that happens to you, then you can always put these in the freezer. And then have them like that. Then they don't open until they get to the intestines. And then that completely takes care of anything like that. But this Enteripure coating helps deal with that very common fishy burp bap that sometimes can happen with fish oils. And this dose here, 2,200 milligrams, certainly for anybody with heart health concerns, and especially in the winter when we tend to, typical winter when it's actually cold, we need more omega-3s. Okay, and then last, a shameless plug for the book here. If you want further reading, consider boning up on vitamin K2, the history of it, how it was overlooked. Books available on all your online booksellers. And if you are supplementing with either calcium or vitamin D, really important to consider supplementing also with vitamin K2 and magnesium to get that calcium and keep it in its place. So that's a summary. Things I didn't touch on so much or only very briefly includes exercise, stress management, an antioxidant-rich diet, keeping out processed foods, the nutrients I already mentioned. But as a final note, laughter has been shown to help our blood vessels function better. Specifically, laughter appears to benefit the endothelium, that amazing lining to our blood vessels, helps to dilate it and keep it healthy. So hopefully that's a good take-home point for I don't know about bone health, but certainly for heart health. Okay, all the products mentioned here are tested clean by Isura. You can check out isura.ca for their CSI type testing, third-party testing to test for over 800 different contaminants. Okay, and this brings us up to the end of the presentation. Thank you, everyone,